Okay, so you were talking about that you wanted to be a police officer from childhood, but you obviously didn't get the OP, and you worked out why, I guess, or how you learn once you got to the academy.
Yeah.
What did you do after you finished school?
Well, when I first left school, so I met, I suppose I hooked up with a girlfriend at school, and her father was a crayfisherman up north, up in Torres Straits. So he died for a tropical rock lobster up there. And so when I left school, she had to go to uni, and so she went to Toowoomba because that was close to me. And I'd been working in the fruit shop. My parents didn't have a hell of a lot of money. They were lucky enough to send me to quite a good school with a bit of government help and all that sort of thing. So I used to work a lot in fruit stores, in holidays. So I used to call school a holiday, which is probably reflected in my OP score. But I'm more of a social sort of person, I suppose. And so I basically went back to work in the fruit store, and I also started my own business doing lawn mowing and landscaping and all that sort of stuff, just to try and keep the money ticking over. And in those, it was probably it was probably right up to 2007. I left school in 94, so right up until probably the end of the 90s or about 97. I used to go fly up to Torres Straits or Thursday Island on holidays when it was holiday time, and my ex-father-in-law used to take me crayfishing or diving for rock lobster, which kind of freaked me out when I first did it because it's a pretty dangerous profession, and I did that so when she actually finished uni, I went up there full time and worked on the boat, and got my own boat dinghy. I was a subcontractor off the boat. It's you work about 120 days a year. The rest of the time you're just doing stuff on the boat or going on holidays and all that sort of thing. So you need to make sure you earn a lot of money. So I did that for right up until about 2006 is when I finished off, and then basically it was one of those things where I invested a whole lot of more money into my business up there because they were doing restrictions and that in the fishery, or I'd go and do something else. And I'd already broken up with my first wife by that stage, so I figured that basically it wasn't good for relationships going out to, because you're going out to sea for 120 days a year, you're not around home much and all that sort of thing. And towards the end of 2005, I'd met and I was going out with my next wife-to-be wife, I suppose. And she was a teacher or just started teaching up in Port Douglas. So basically, when I left, and my dad suggested that, I go over, and my uncle suggested I go to the Northern Territory Police. So I put in an application, and my ex-wife now, she put in for teaching over there and got it straight away. And so we just moved over, and then I started in the police. So yeah.
Do you ever get the feeling that you pick jobs that anti-marriage?
Well, yes. Funnily enough, and I think I said to you before, whether on this or off it, and I've said I was always a sucker for punishment. I always put 100% into everything that I did, and policing was no difference. If they, like I said, I think before, that if I went out bush, if they wanted someone to go out bush, I went out bush. I just did everything I possibly could to because I loved policing. It was my life. And that obviously reflected in my marriage as well, because I was just so involved in the job. I loved it. I really policing. It's my ultimate job. It always has been. It's in my blood. That will be the best career I will ever have in my life. So it's I really loved it, and I was born to be a police officer. Unfortunately, I think that the police force is a structure these days that isn't really suited to my style of policing, and if we could put it that way.
You were born too late. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, mate. Yeah, definitely. When I joined the Northern Territory, it was like the last frontier. So They hadn't really caught up with the other states, and you were left. You had a lot of autonomy, and I really enjoyed being in control. I'll actually tell you a funny story. This is later on in my career, towards the end, and I had a bit of a disagreement with one of my sergeants over a planned event. And anyway, my senior sergeant, he was actually off duty. He was fishing at the time, but he overheard the discussion, let's say.
Yeah.
And anyway, I was walking back up to my house, and because he was staying with me out there when we were out at Borroloola, and he goes, "Oh, what was that?" And I said, "Oh, just some miscommunication and blah blah blah." Anyway, he goes, He said, "She obviously didn't get the memo." I said, "What memo?" He said, we tell you what to do, and then you do whatever the fuck you want anyway.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see a pattern in that from talking to you about those sorts of things. Okay, look, talking about I guess about stories probably is a good time to sort of go into what are some of the more standout war stories or worries that you have that sort of shine the light on what life's really like as a copper in the Northern Territory.
I think, look, I mentioned one earlier, and that was Damo said, when he went to when you're working in Indigenous communities, you can get up to 300 people fighting. I had one memorable one for me was, I think it was around 2014 or 15, and basically, what people need to understand, there's different tribes. There's so many different tribes of Aboriginals, and the tribes hate each other a lot of the time. So they'll have grievances that go back centuries, from something that happened back in the 1800s and so on and so forth. So what happened was Elcho Island had come over to Ramangini, and I can't even remember. It was probably over two people having an argument. That's how these fights basically start out. And it was quite big. Like, it was probably about 300 to 500 people, and they're like just fighting, and it's just happening all over town. And we're going through, but we could walk through as cops and not get touched. The fight was between the tribes, not between the police. So, but we got to the stage where I still remember vividly a guy getting stabbed in front of me. And I had to grab him and pull him back and get him to the clinic and all that sort of stuff. It's but I mean, we were lucky because that's their grievance was with each other, not with us. But in the end, it went on for about half a day, and I was on the phone to the superiors all the time, and they'd agreed that they would send TRG, which is our, I think, CERT, it's called here in Queensland. And basically, I yelled out over the top of them. I said, "I'm on the phone to my commander right now, and they will have, the TRG out here within 4 hours if you don't stop this fighting." And the people from Elcho Island had many years ago, there was someone shot when a similar thing was going on by people in the TRG. So they were quite terrified of the TRG actually coming out there. And so they literally, it stopped instantly, and they got on a plane or boats and went back to Elcho Island. So
I'm surprised they didn't go 4 hours. That gives us another 3 hours of doing it in time to get home.
But that was pretty intense. There's some pretty intense jobs when you're out there and you're outnumbered. There was only 3 cops there at the time. So there's not really a lot you can do. You've just got to manage it the best you can. So anything else? And I'll do this because you got me to tell a couple of stories on your podcast. So what's a funny type of incident that's occurred where you look back and oh my God, why did I? It was early on, and I tell this one fairly regularly. It's a fairly funny story. So we were a good mate of mine he's still in the police actually up in Darwin, and but I'll name him. I named him in our podcast when I told the story, so I'll name him here. But Andrew Duggan, and we call him Duggo. And he was a squad just after us. And we were driving around one night. And this is we were only pretty fresh in the police then. Like, we would have only been a year or something. in policing. And anyway, we're driving around East Side, Catherine, and Catherine is a very busy town. And we get a call. It's about, about 9 or 10 o'clock, I think. And we get this call over the radio, 481, I think our car was. And they said, can you attend down the main street of Catherine? We've got a woman walking towards Kalana community. She's got a 6-month-old in one arm and a machete in the other. And she's walking to Kalana to kill her husband.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, you've been in the police before, and any police officer understand going, holy shit, how do you handle this one? And so anyway, the funny thing, Dan, and you know what we always do is risk assess when we go into these jobs.
Yep.
So we're going down there, and I said to Dago, I turned to him, I said, mate, how are we going to do this? Like, how are we going to? He goes, well, he said, you've got the taser. You taser her, and I'll catch the baby. So anyway, that was our risk assessment when we got there. Good plan.
Yeah, great plan.
So anyway, we get down there, and by the time we get down there, she's actually crossing the high level bridge, which is just to the north of Catherine, heading up towards Darwin. And so we pull up on the bridge. Now you've got to think the Stewart Highway. It's a big highway. It's a main thoroughfare from Darwin right down to basically Adelaide. So there's a lot of traffic going, to and forth, and we've actually cut the traffic off. She's walking on the pedestrian part of the bridge, and so Duggo's gone around and run over and actually jumped over and tried to talk to her. He's standing about 10 meters back. Luckily, somebody's already taken the kid off her, so she hasn't got the 6-month-old. So our risk assessment was out the window, but we could go with the rest of it. And anyway, so he's trying to talk to her, trying to calm her down and all this sort of stuff, and just keep his distance and trying to get her to put the machete down, all that sort of thing. And I was walking up on a diagonal from behind her, so I was at a 45 degree coming up behind her, and she had a backpack on as well, and basically I had the taser out and drawn and ready to shoot. Anyway, she's basically got the shits in the end with whatever Duggo was saying, and she's lifted like the machete up, and she said, if you're not going to fucking help me, then, and he just turned to me, Duggo, calm as anything, he goes, light her up, Schultzy. So it wasn't, there's none of this deploy the taser or any crap like that. It was light her up.
It was light her up, yeah.
Anyway, so I fired the taser, and anybody that understands tasers, where your dot is, which you got a red dot, that's where the first barb goes, and it shoots straight and it hits. The other barb goes on a 45 degree diagonal, like down. So you've got to try and you've got to be like, it's perfect if you're front on or back on. When you're a little bit to the side, however, you've got to be really accurate, because the second barb will miss, and that's what happened. So she, though, in that instant, she got hit. She thought she'd been shot, because it hits with quite an impact, those little barbs.
Yep.
And she's dropped the machete. However, I'm sitting there going, oh shit, I've stuffed up, but I didn't turn the taser off before, because we got spare cartridges. So I actually grabbed the cartridge while it was still cycling to take it off, and I tasered myself. So I got zapped in front of about 50 people, 50 onlookers. I actually tasered myself.
Oh, that's hilarious. I left just before we got tasers. And one of the things that I was probably glad was that when we got given pepper spray, you actually had to, be sprayed so you knew what it was like.
Yep.
So that way, then when you deployed it, you knew what effect you were having on the people you were deploying it on. Thankfully, I'd left just as tasers were being deployed. So I, touch wood, have never been tasered. And I'm pretty sure that's a good thing, just quietly. I've been with, you get into enough issues with pepper spray. I've been, standing behind someone and doing a, at the time, legal lateral vascular restraint.
Yep.
A week later, not so.
Yeah.
someone goes, "Oh, I'll just spray them," and stupid
Mm.
moves his head, and you cop the full force
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
spray and that sort of stuff. So I can imagine what it'd be like with a taser. I'd be changing what are they called? Police pants all the time. I'd probably wet myself each time I get tasered. Um, All right. What I want to do is sort of go a little bit into one of the things that I talk about in this podcast is PTSD and some of the
Yep.
effects that I've had, and because I've been out for such a longer time, you tend to notice it more than when you just leave.
Yep.
What about you? Because you didn't go in straight from a young age. You did other things. You had life experience.
Yep.
Do you feel that you have any signs of PTSD?
Oh yeah, I definitely do. Damo and I, like I think part of the reason that I survived, like even going through the police with and being reasonably sane and healthy, was because basically Damo, he was like we were inseparable, like always talking, catch up. If we had a problem, like something happened in the police, we'd just discuss it, and it's a burden, spread across two shoulders. You're carrying half the weight.
Yep.
And I'll touch on something that's basically, I mean, this is, and you probably know it as well. When you go further on in your career, you come a little bit complacent to a sense, or a little bit like it doesn't excite you as much, like the jobs. And
Yeah.
I'll touch on. So there was one when I was in Borroloola. This is my last year in the police, and this mental guy was carrying on, and he we got caught up there. He's mentally ill. He's going off. The family are terrified from him. He's threatening them with weapons and all that sort of stuff. And anyway, I'm usually quite good at chatting to people. I can talk them into the cage. I don't like using force, but I will if it's necessary and all that sort of thing. Mate, I'd rocked up. My pepper spray on my belt hadn't had pepper spray in it for about 3 years. Like, I always use the party packs, which is the Mark 9, like it's a little fire extinguisher.
Yep.
And I didn't have the taser on, but my partner, she had the taser and she had the Mark 9. And anyway, so we're there and I'm trying to chat to him, and he basically gets the shits and he throws a milk crate at me, and I deflect it. We're a good 15 metres away and I deflect it. And anyway, I kind of thought, I'm not going to be able to talk this guy down. He's just obviously, he's up with the fairies or whichever land he's on. And I think we're going to have to step this up a notch. And anyway, so I turned to my partner. I said, look, you give me the taser. You hold the pepper spray. So I clipped it on my belt and I was still talking to him. And about probably a couple of minutes later, he obviously really got the shits that this conversation wasn't going the way he wanted to. And he picked up a tire iron and a screwdriver and basically bolted towards me. And the whole family took off out the front at the front gate of the house. My partner, she ran with them. Anyway, I said, like, I kind of took a step back and I've gone, nah. I've pulled the taser up, I've pulled it out, and I've hit him. Absolutely, it was textbook, absolutely textbook. And and his head, to the point that the taser hit him perfectly. His head landed at my feet, so that's how close he was. And then I've just turned to my partner. I said, do you want to get back in here? I said, cuff him. And so she's walked in and cuffed him. I said, I'm going to call the clinic because we've got to get him assessed, and, we've got to get these barbs out. Well, we pulled the barbs out. And then I said, all right, we'll take him to the cage. I was on the phone to the clinic. And anyway, we put him in the cage. People don't usually fight after they've been tasered. They're usually pretty compliant.
Yep.
And
compliant. Yep.
Yeah. And so we put him in the back of the cage and I was walking to, because I was driving, and I was sitting there thinking, there's no adrenaline. There's nothing. There is nothing at all in my system. I am calm as anything. Anyway, I sat in the front seat, and my partner, she got in beside me, and she turned to me and she goes, that has got to be the calmest I've seen anybody in a high risk, environment. She goes, you didn't even, there was no flutter. There was no, shaking. There's nothing. And I was sitting there going, shit, there's something wrong with me. There's something seriously wrong with me. Anyway, so I went down. I checked my Apple Watch after. My heartbeat had not skipped a beat. It was exactly the same. It was level. It was It was just like it was, a Sunday morning having breakfast. And
Yeah.
anyway, a couple of weeks later, I actually caught up with Damo. I was up in Darwin for something, and I said, "Do you want to come and have a beer?" And I told him about it, and I said, "Mate, I think there's something seriously wrong with me." I said, "I should be reacting to this stuff, and I'm not." And he just turned to me and he goes, "It's the same for me." And and that to me, I was gone, "Oh shit! All right, so other people actually, it's not just me." Because I thought I was mentally ill or something, And I think that's it's part of the you see so much trauma in your career as a police officer that you become desensitized to a certain
Yeah.
extent, and it's just all normal, run of the mill sort of work you're doing. And I think the problem is though afterwards. So to talk about the PTSD. I remember when I first left the police and I went to a New Year's Eve celebration and I couldn't relax. I was sitting there looking for people, trying to sabotage, like blow up this bridge and all that sort of thing. I was just,
Yeah.
my partner, who's my partner now, Miriam, she's absolutely beautiful. And she was looking at me and she goes, "Holy shit, you're just on edge." And I was, because I was just worried. You've got a few thousand people at this celebration. There's a bridge. This is a perfect example. Somebody could bloody blow it up and kill 100 people or 1,000 people if they want to do. And you still get and you get the heart races for that. Like, your heart rate goes up. You get the chills. You'll suddenly go into this zone where you think something's going to happen. So and I think the more I've been out, 7 years now, the longer it goes on, it doesn't really diminish much. You can probably comment on that because you've been out for quite a while.
Well, I've been out for 20 years, and it's the hypervigilance. And you're right, you heightened sense of, I don't want to say paranoia, but it could almost be paranoia as well to a certain extent.
Yep. Yeah, it's
have you found that affect other things? So with me, the example is road rage, stupid people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, people don't indicate, mate. That sends me in an absolute rage.
Well, we're not Melbourne. It shouldn't be that bad. But and look, the other thing is, I guess, one of the big things I struggle with is, and I've spoken about this a couple of times. So people either do or don't respect the job, but you don't have to explain yourself to people as to what your job is or what you do, etc. When you go to someone, and you say, "I need you to do this."
Yep.
And by virtue of the fact that you're a police officer,
Yep.
That has a certain gravitas, and people don't go. Some people do go, "What do you mean?"
Yeah.
You just arrest them. That's and I guess the biggest issue I have is I'm an expert in my field now.
Yep.
I know my shit, but I still have people who go, "You don't know what you're talking about," and that then leads to me being aggressive, and me blowing my top, and that sort of thing. And you can correlate the two between I've gone from this situation where I could do that, I've left now. People have the same disrespect as they probably did when I was a police officer, but I can't do anything about it.
Yeah. That's exactly.
There's no outlet for it.
Yep. That's exactly right. Like I still remember one of my sayings was the fact that you're talking to somebody down the street and it's not really serious, and you're trying to get them to go their separate ways. And I'll sit there and go, "Look, you've got two choices. Basically, you get on your bike and go home, or I'll take you to the cells." And they sit there and go, "Oh no, I'd rather." I said, "No, this isn't a negotiation. You got two choices. If you don't make a choice up in the next 30 seconds, I'm going to make it for you, and you won't like my choice." So, and that was the joy of being a police
and it's funny. It's funny because in the corporate world, there's this thing about, you have to bring people along with you. You have to sell your idea. You have to sell your changes and change management and all that sort of stuff. And you go, okay, so it's been 12 months trying to change things. When do you get to the point where you just go, hey, stupid, this is what's happening. Let's
Yep.
do it.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, yeah.
But there's none of that. There's this whole, oh no, you've got to keep trying to convince people, blah 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 blah. And that's one thing I've struggled with, because I've spent so long in my formative years going, okay, you have a choice, you have a choice, you have a choice. No fucking choice, you're coming with me.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah, and it is frustrating trying to deal with, like some people, and you're just sitting there going, just make a choice. Like, we got to move on here. We can't, if you imagine if police actually went to an incident and they were sitting there umming and ahhing for the next month on how they're going to handle it, nothing would ever get done.
Yeah. No, you're right. How do you find that in politics?
Sorry.
How do you find that in politics?
Well, mate, so I'm helping out on a campaign at the moment, and it is so you're dealing with a lot of egos when it comes to politics. Everybody wants to get their name and face recognised for helping out on a campaign and all that sort of stuff. And I'm the campaign manager, like for this particular one, and you've got to basically, and unfortunately, like I said, it's definitely not a well-oiled machine. They couldn't organise, as in even the whole party as a structure. They couldn't organise anything, and anyway, so I'm trying to bring them into it. It's more like it's a police style of doing things. So people in the police, they have jobs. We have a like a sergeant. He knows what's going on, and he's the one that directs the troops. So
Yep.
and those troops don't step out their lane, so to speak, when they're doing their tasks. They do it and they come back to the sergeant, and then it goes back and forth. Problem is, you've got to try and bring people into that way of thinking. And for people that's never had that way of thinking or understand the structure of the police force, it's very hard to do. However, some people might disagree, going, well, you shouldn't be doing it like the police. And I said, but the police is very efficient when it comes to getting jobs done.
And getting decisions made.
Exactly. Yep. And there's a
Yeah.
hierarchy. So look, it's definitely a task, but I'm getting there. I'm slowly getting people to understand that the way my method, because even to a certain extent they sit there, oh, you're too laid back. I said, but the thing is, you've got to be watching over everything. I can't get involved in things, because if I don't, I'll lose sight of what's happening off to the left of me or the right to me. My job is to sit there and overlook everybody. So it's, but I mean, it's a learning curve. Let's put it that way.
Fair enough. I guess that brings me to another point. So when police leave the police, hang on, let me rephrase that. When people leave the police, they don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. They don't know what sort of jobs they could be looking at.
Yep.
One of the things that I found with mine, so a people job, which I'm doing in recruitment, but also a heavy process role where you have steps you have to follow. When you do those steps, A, B, or C happens, and you can follow it through. And I'm a firm believer that that's the sort of jobs probably people leaving the police should start to look at, because that's what their life has been for 5, 10, 15, 25 years or whatever it is. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, mate. So when I actually left the police, probably the easiest way to touch on that is the fact I applied for a lot of jobs, and it was a lot of jobs, especially in the way of running teams. I wouldn't ever say, and I'll even say now, I'm not the best leader in the world. I'm not the best person in charge. However, I've had a lot of experience doing it, and I've learnt every step of the way on how to be better at what I do. And when you look at, and you'll probably agree with me here, when you look at some of the leaders around the place at the moment, you're just going, holy shit.
Yeah, true.
And so I applied for a lot of jobs that basically had that role, and stuff that I could almost do in my sleep. Because, I mean, if you look at every police officer, and especially the ones that have been in really significant stuff, like, you were undercover. I ran a station, out in Arnhem Land for 3 years, and I prosecuted as well. And I also led them through 2 cyclones, so I was a disaster management as well, and all this sort of stuff. So I applied for a lot of these jobs, and you don't even get a look in. And I'm going, you look at the people that get it, and you're going, I'm 100 times more experienced than that. But also my problem, I don't have those ticks behind my name to say that I can do this, even though I have done it, if you know what I mean. So, I've got basically a diploma in
Yeah.
public safety, which I got through the police, and I've done my detectives training and all that sort of stuff. I've got all this training I've done, but, they like the letters or the ticks after in the boxes for the degrees and all that sort of stuff.
Here's something that, and this is probably another podcast episode, but it's very hard because when you apply for a job in the police, you have to write it in a certain way.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
When you apply for a job in the real world, you have to write it in a completely different way.
Yep.
And people don't understand. They look at their police history and they go, "Oh, I've been a police officer.
Yeah.
What else have I done?"
Yeah.
And they don't look at the little things.
Yeah.
Whereas you can take some of the things. So, for example, I became a tour leader. Now, I relied on the fact that I had to deal with stressful situations. I had to deal with situations that required you to think quickly. I had to deal with, situation with multiple people, organize multiple things if something was happening, run multiple things, that sort of stuff. So I took instances of each of those things to say, here's where I could be a good tour leader because I've got this experience on these little things. Most people look at the policing and go, I've been a police officer. How do I break that down? And again, this is probably another episode thing, but I think one of the things you need to do is write down all the things that you've done and then go, okay, well, I could use that or I could use that. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, when you left, did you have an idea of what you want, other than going into politics? Did you have an idea of what you wanted to do, or you just thought, oh, I'll do investigating roles or I'll do government roles because that's what everyone says I should do?
Oh, not so much. I loved investigating. I loved working as a detective. Like it was some of the highlights of my career. I really love reading people and I love figuring out why they do what they do. And to be completely honest, when I left, if I knew what I knew now, I would have taken that year's leave without pay. And I would have actually gone over to the States and tried to talk to the behavioural science unit of the FBI. Because I think they are just incredible what they do. It's absolutely amazing. If anybody's ever watched Mindhunter or read the book, it is just absolutely mind-blowing. And I love the psychology. One of my talents, I suppose, or natural abilities is to read people and judge, what they're going to do or why they're doing it and so on and so forth. And I just thought, wow, that would have, I would have been, I would have been like a duck on the pond. I would have been happy as anything doing that. So I wanted to try and do investigative roles, and I actually applied even in the army to investigate incidents, between other troops and stuff like that. And they were, out of all the ones I applied for, they were the only ones that called me back. And the only reason they didn't take me was because the last 3 years I hadn't been in a detective role. I'd been out bush. And they said they wanted somebody with that had been working as a detective within the last 3 years. And which is which is a bit of a pain because I think I would like that.
But it's interesting you talk about the reading people and that sort of stuff, because I use a lot of that when I interview candidates. When I'm speaking to candidates and that sort of thing, I use a lot of those skills. Now, I didn't have them before I joined. Whether they were inherent or not is another issue. But I learnt how to do that. I remember having a sergeant when I was really early in my career who said to me, you're going to see someone and you're going to say, there's something wrong here. And 95% of the time, you're going to be right.
That's right.
There is something wrong. And so I use that now, that learned ability in recruitment. Now, who would have thought that you could use your police stuff in recruitment?
That's right. Exactly.
And as I keep saying, I interview people. I'm just not allowed to use a phone book anymore.
Mate. We never got the joy of phone books either. but the world of policing had changed by the time we joined. So I'll tell you a funny one there, and this is a story when I was back training. People constables straight out of the college, and anyway, I've been training this guy for a couple of months, and we'd gone to it was a domestic incident that morning. I mean, we've been to thousands of jobs, and it was a domestic incident, and it was funny because the woman was absolutely going apeshit. The male was so calm, but he was too calm, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
And anyway, she looked like the offender. She looked like she was just going off her tree and all that sort of thing. It wasn't physical and all that sort of stuff. And anyway, I said, nah, he's the one. And so one thing we always did in the police, and I'll talk on this after I finish this incident. We were at the police club just after, when we finished shift. Most of the time we went over to the police club for 1 or 2 beers, sometimes 100. And I was sitting there, and my junior officer, he turned to me and he goes, "How do you know?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean, how do I know?" And he goes, "I've been to thousands of incidents with you." And he said, basically on arrival, you know who the offender is, you know who the victim is, and you know who the witnesses are. You can identify them almost immediately. And he said, and he said, to date, I still haven't seen you get it wrong. Why? How do you do it? And I said, I don't know how I do it. And I said, but I explained to him, like, that incident, that domestic we'd gone to, because that obviously tweaked him. I said, you've usually the one that screams and points fingers, they're usually the offender, because the aggressive people, the ones that go off, they always point the finger at somebody else to try and take the focus off them. But I said, in that incident this morning, you look, he was too calm. Because domestics are very emotional. People get emotional. He should have had a better emotional response to that incident, but he didn't, and he was acting because he was trying to act calm so she would look guilty. So it was, but I never realised I had that ability until he kind of pointed that out, because I'd just been doing it. You know what I mean? Like, it was a skill that I didn't realise I'd learned. From being in the police, until he kind of pointed it out.
And you're right. And that's I guess what I'm getting at when people apply for jobs. They have these skills that they don't know that they have. And that's one of the things that I think is important. Anyway, look, I'll move on.
Yep.
What's a common myth you think that people have about being a copper?
I was going to say we drink too much, but that's definitely true.
Yeah.
A myth. I don't really know. I've never really thought about it. Have you heard of any yourself?
Look, I guess, the things like everyone eats donuts.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, no, I mean, the problem is donuts, we didn't really have them up in the territory. There was
I don't think we've had them in Australia.
Like that. And, I actually once said to Damo in one of our podcast episodes, he said he was walking down the street, for lunch, and I said, "You're going to get donuts?" He goes, "No." He said, "Donuts is more like an American cop thing." And he said, and besides, the choice of donuts in Tennant Creek is very sparse. But I just want to touch on something. Just something I touched on before. We were very big believers in the police club, or the police clubs up in the Northern Territory, and I know they kind of died out in other police forces earlier on, but a lot of them stuck around. When I was specifically shift sergeant in Katherine, I would almost make it mandatory that people come over to the police club. I don't care if they drink water at the end of every shift for at least half an hour. But because my whole belief, and I got taught by Bob Rennie, one of the real senior officers, he was the first one we met when we went up to the police club in Darwin there. And it's the thing of, you offload here at the police club and don't take it home. And you're also talking to people that understand what you're going through. So if you've had a traumatic incident, then we'll spend longer here, because it's easier to talk to people that understand what you're saying.
Yep.
And Damon and I talk about this a bit, and taking nothing away from psychologists and all that sort of thing. But I've always found talking to like-minded people who have actually done the job is far more beneficial for me than talking to somebody that, they study psychology and all that sort of thing, but they've never lived it. So that was, I loved the police clubs for that reason. And, and I obviously, I'm reasonably sane. I'd like to think so. I've still got, my own little demons and all that sort of stuff, but I can tell you I spent a lot of time in that police club.
Yep.
So
it's interesting. The only police club I suppose when I was in the city, I used to go to the one in Brisbane, but that got knocked down. But in Mount Isa, that was a big one. Mount Isa, the police club there.
Yeah.
Partly because it was downstairs in the barracks, which was both good and bad. Bad if you had a 6 a.m. start on a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
But good if you didn't.
Yeah.
What do you think the most difficult part about being a copper is?
I think, especially for us, trying to manage differentiating between the job and your home life. Yep. And Damo said it's perfect. He said, any police officer would know this well, when you're on duty, you're sitting at a level that most people don't sit at, because you've got to be really tuned in with what's happening around you, and you're really attentive about what's going on. Like, you're looking for crime and looking for danger and all that sort of stuff. But when you come home, it's kind of like you've drained your batteries, and you're like a mobile phone on a charger. So one of the difficulties was definitely managing your home life, because, like Damo said, you get home and, your wife goes, "Oh, do you want to go and do this?" "Yeah, maybe." Like, "Oh, how was your shift?" "Yeah, it was good." And he goes, "You're just sitting there because you don't, all you want to do is try and build your battery back up before you go and do it again." And I think that was probably one of the hardest things to learn. I mean, I think what burnt me out in the end, I did bush policing for 4 years, and it didn't matter when you were home, you're getting called out. So I lived those jobs. And preceding that, I was working in the family and domestic violence unit, and I was doing 14-hour days. I could write my own overtime. It was that busy. That was when I was in Catherine.
And it does take a lot out of you, I guess. And what do you think then, with those sorts of things, what's the most surprising thing you've learned about yourself?
Probably how resilient I really was. Like, I remember, I'll go back to the family and domestic violence unit. When we were working there, we used to get psych assessed, I think, every 3 months, because it's a fairly stressful, you're dealing with emotional stuff all the time. And, we're completely fine. And one of the questionnaires the psychologists would get to fill out was, do you ever feel like not coming in the morning, like coming to work in the morning? And I go, no, always. It didn't matter whether I spent 18 hours and only got a quarter of the stuff done the day before that I really wanted to get done. I would still jump up the next day and go, yep, I'm going to get it done today. And I did that day in and day out for basically 5 years, non-stop. And it was probably 4 years, because I remember, and I was doing it when I went out and took over the station, Ramangini. I was just going absolutely hammer and tongs, like getting up, and you still got a pile of paperwork next to you, and you just keep on going hard. And then, out of the blue, I woke up one morning, because I was always in there at 7, even though I started at 8. And I woke up one morning and I've just gone, I don't have to go until 8. Why bother? And only because I'd filled out that questionnaire, it clicked. And I've gone, that's it. It's finally broken me. So that was, that was a learning curve.
And I was just going to go on with that to say, you were talking about, you were out and you didn't get that buzz and that sort of thing when you realised. Was it also part of that as well, that you woke up and you go, I don't really want to do this. Why am I doing this?
Yeah, but basically, I love the job itself, but I remember, like, the last year. So when I was in Brolul, that was absolutely flat out, and this had already happened. I was basically lived, on the station ground, so I'd rock in at 8 on the dot. and and I'd leave it for.
You get up at 7:55.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah, basically roll out of bed and walk into the police station. But and I still remember. I think back. I was considered. If I look back on me back then, I was definitely like on the verge of breaking down. I would. Luckily, I'd actually learned how to meditate, and I used to go home at lunch and lie down on my bed for half an hour and meditate, so I could get through the afternoon shift. So that's how, and it was one of those things. I was also the 2IC there, so I'd stepped down from being a sergeant, but I was basically in charge of the troops, and then the sergeant was in charge of all of us.
Yep.
So I would check the files, but I still remember sitting there thinking, if we got an arrest, well, the troops would turn to me and go, basically look at me and go, "What are we doing?" And I go, "Okay, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this." Basically, if it was an overtime shift where I had to watch them overnight, I'll do the last shift of watching them before they get on the plane to fly to Darwin if they're remanded in custody. That way, I check the file because I was a prosecutor. And I remember at one stage we got this arrest, and I knew it was coming because they were going to turn to me once again. What are our jobs? And I just turned there and I go, I wish somebody else could do this. I was tired. It wasn't that I wasn't capable. I was just tired of doing it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you meditate now?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. Yeah.
Do you find it helpful?
Yeah, definitely. I don't really need it that much at the moment, but especially I was working in the council office, and and it was pretty busy at times, and I had a lot of other stuff going on as well. There was one stage I had 3 jobs on the go, and there was sometimes there where I'd actually sit there and go, "No, I just need to calm the mind for a little bit." I used to do it with beer, but I don't do it with beer as much anymore.
Fair enough. So I guess there are people listening to this that might not be in the police and or might think they want to join the police. What advice do you have for firstly, what advice do you have for someone who wants to be a police officer? And secondly, what do you think is the most crucial trait someone needs to be a police officer? We'll go with the trait first. What do you think's the most crucial trait someone needs to have to be a police officer?
To be a police officer, I think you don't have you have to be a certain personality, or you're better if you're a certain personality. You need to be able to handle confrontation, because confrontation happens all the time. I myself personally don't like confrontation that much, but I've always been involved in it because it's just the way my life has run. I've always put myself in roles where it is like that, and I've always, like I said, I've always stood up for the underdog. So it's that's just the person that I am. But because I know some people weren't I work with some people that weren't overly confrontational, and it was you had to walk in, you have to talk to these people. If they're a rape victim, you have to talk to them. You need to get this information out of them. You can't be shy about doing that. And you've also got to be considerate and compassionate when you're doing it as well. But you have to face these things as a police officer. So yeah, that's probably one of the main things I would say. You've got to be able to handle confrontation, and you've got to be able to do it. Once you do it for a while, it will become second nature. If you look at my personality, because they did personality tests in the police, and I'm an influential sort of person. But it was funny when they were actually doing it, and then they did some role plays about situations. And the sergeant who'd known me for a very long time, and he said, none of you actually sit in the dominant thing. But he said, Schultzy, I want you to act in the dominant thing. He said, this isn't your personality, but I've seen you do it 100 times, through your career, because you were a sergeant. You had to be. You had to make sure you laid down the law and all that sort of stuff. And I never really kind of realised or thought about it that way. So I think confrontation is definitely the main one. For people wanting to join the police, do it.
Mm-hmm.
It was the best thing I ever did in my life. Even though, I've talked about some, shit things and all that about coming out after and all that. But I tell you what, I have got stories till the end of my life and beyond. It was some of the best fun I had in my life. And the
Yeah,
fact we got paid to do it.
I concur.
Sorry, mate. Go.
Well, yeah. No, that's okay. I was just going to say, and that was probably the glitch. We're having some internet issues again.
Yeah.
But people say to me, "Oh, you went through and you're out, so you probably wouldn't recommend." It's like, no, I'll never say no to someone. Don't join. It'll be join, but be aware of the beast that policing is. Be aware of the impact it's going to have on you.
Yes, definitely. I said you've got to understand. You have to be involved. It's a lifestyle. This is not policing is not a job. It's a lifestyle. You've got to do it for the right reasons, and you've got to do it. You've got to give it 100%, because if you don't, you'll fall behind very quickly, and you'll probably become even more traumatized, I think, by the end of it. And the other important thing for anybody wanting to join, you are not going to save the world. You will be happy with saving those few that you can save and help. Don't go in there thinking you're going to change the world, because it just won't happen.
Yeah, very true. And talking about embracing the lifestyle, if you're married, probably get divorced before you go in.
I can definitely vouch for that, mate.
All right, look, what I might do, we've spoken about a lot of things, and I just want to, do you want to give another plug for your and Damo's podcast and where people can find it?
Yeah, mate. Yeah. So basically, Damo and I think we started about the same time, and it's called Two Ordinary Cops. The reason we call ourselves ordinary, because we're nothing out of the normal policing. We tell our stories and all that sort of thing, but we're nothing special. We were cops like the men and women out there today doing the job. And there's far better cops than what we were. There's far better leaders than what we were. And that's why we called ourselves ordinary, because we never really wanted to talk up. We don't think we're anything special. We just did the job, and we love the job. And we love the funny stories, because people love the funny stories. So if you want to listen to, we've got everything on there. We talk about PTSD. We talk about leadership. We talk about funny stories. They're one of the most popular ones, and there are some funny ones like that one I told earlier. We talk about specialist roles, what it's like moving from a detective, in and out of detectives and plain clothes, and back into frontline policing. And we talk about the college as well, what it's like going through the college. So if you want to join the police force, have a listen to our first episode, because it runs through what the college life is like and what our experiences were. And then the next episode is once we just got out on the road. So we talk about some of the horrific incidents we've been to. We talk about our worst jobs, which was very difficult for both of us to talk about. They're the ones that haunt us today. So if you really want to get a good understanding, then have a listen to Two Ordinary Cops. You can, if you search Two Ordinary Cops, just on your internet, it's twoordinarycops.com, and that would lead you to the website. Otherwise, you can go on our Facebook page. If you look up Two Ordinary Cops, we're there. If you want to email us, you can. It's contact us at twoordinarycops.com. So, yeah.
And my pod roll also has a link to the podcast on both Spotify and the Apple one, whatever it is.
Apple iTunes.
I'm subscribed to you guys, so people can find it there.
Awesome.
Yeah, something like that. And I'll there will be a link in the bottom as well. All right, look, what I might do before we finish up, I want to just think, hopefully I'm going to get Damo on in the next couple of weeks as well to have a chat to him, to tell some stories about you.
Yep.
And
I should have told more about him. Jeez, I missed the boat.
You didn't think of that, did you?
No.
Mate, what I'll do is I'll leave the last comment to you.
Okay. Look, in saying that, I was just going to touch on something we spoke about off air. I think it was when we before we started the recording, and basically us doing this podcast. You reached out because you saw us on the Thin Blue Line, and said, would you be happy about getting on? And then I spoke to you on the phone. We talk about the thin blue line. Yes, it is a thin blue line, but it's bloody strong. It doesn't matter
Yep.
what jurisdiction you come from. It doesn't matter which country you come from. You will understand, and you've got a camaraderie that never goes away. So if you want to join the police, that's what it is. It's a lifestyle, and you've got comrades, so to speak, that and they will stick up for you. We always used to sit there, and there was one cop at one stage, and he'd sit there and go, "Yeah, he might be a retard, but he's our retard." You know what I mean? He's one of us, and we'll always stick up for him.
It really is like a big family. It's like when everyone says, "Oh, I'm going to get you." It's like, well, yeah, but what about my 10,000 brothers and sisters that are behind me? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. What is Bob Rennie says? It's a long blue arm.
It is, and it really is a worthwhile. I think, from an altruistic point of view, it's a worthwhile calling, and it's a job that you can get immense pride and immense, feeling of doing something good. It has its shit moments and that sort of thing, but all right. Look, I will leave it there. Schultz, thanks for coming on. And to everyone else, thank you for listening to Behind the Thin Blue Line. Look, if you're a current or past police officer and you'd like to tell your story or talk about what you do and what you've done, then please email me at whisperintheshadowspodcast@gmail.com. I will catch you next time, hopefully with Schultz's other half, Damo. Thank you and goodbye.